The workers in the vineyard. The morning began, the way many mornings did. The marketplace was already filling as the sun rose. Men stood in small clusters along the edges of the square, some speaking quietly, others simply watching the road. There is a certain stillness that settles over a place like that, a waiting that feels heavier the longer it lingers. He brought his brother there early. His brother had been looking for work for several days, and the quiet concern in his voice the night before was enough to bring him along at first light. They stood among the others, listening for footsteps, watching for someone who might be looking to hire. Everyone there knew what it meant to be passed over. Time moves differently when you are waiting to be chosen. Then a landowner entered the marketplace. He moved with purpose, scanning the men who stood waiting. When he spoke, it was direct, without hesitation. He asked those nearest him if they were willing to work in his vineyard that day. There was a brief exchange, a question of wages, a moment where expectation met opportunity. After agreeing with the laborers for a denarius a day, he sent them into his vineyard. Matthew chapter 20, verse 2. His brother stepped forward with the others. There was no reluctance in him now, only relief, only gratitude. A full day's wage meant provision. It meant bread on the table. It meant that today, at least, his family would not go without. He turned once before leaving, his face lighter than it had been when they arrived, a quiet joy settling in where concern had been. The man remained in the marketplace longer than he expected, partly because he had nowhere pressing to go, and partly because he found himself watching. The same landowner returned, not once but again and again, at midday. In the afternoon, each time, he found others still standing idle. Why do you stand here idle all day? Matthew chapter 20, verse 6. Because no one has hired us. The answer was always the same. And each time, he sent them into his vineyard. You go into the vineyard too, and whatever is right I will give you. Matthew chapter 20, verse 4. Even late in the day, when the sun had already begun to dip and the hours left were few, he returned once more and called others to go. It felt unnecessary, almost excessive. Most would have passed by at that point. What could a man gain from hiring workers so late? But this man did not seem to measure things the same way. The day ended, and word spread quickly that the workers were gathering to be paid. The man made his way there, more curious than anything else. His brother would be among them, and he wanted to see how the day had gone. They stood in a line, the later workers first. That alone caught his attention. Those who had come at the final hour stepped forward, and each one received a denarius, a full day's wage. A quiet stir moved through the others. Then those who had worked longer began to shift where they stood, the change visible in their posture, in the way they leaned forward slightly. Expectation began to build. When those hired first came, they thought they would receive more. The same thought rose in him. It only made sense. They had borne the burden of the day, the heat, the hours. Surely the master would account for that. But one by one, each of them also received a denarius, and the moment the coin touched their hands, something changed. These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. Matthew chapter 20, verse 12. The words came out sharp, but not without reason. He could feel the pull toward agreement. They were not wrong about the effort. They had done more. He glanced toward his brother. His brother held the coin in his hand, turning it slightly in the fading light. The same coin he had been promised that morning. The same coin that had brought him such relief just hours before. Now there was a quiet tension in his face. Not open anger, not yet. But something had shifted, as if he were trying to reconcile what he had been promised with what he now expected. That morning, he had been grateful simply to be chosen. Now he stood among those who had worked all day, holding the same wage as those who had worked only an hour. The man could not tell what his brother was thinking, but he could feel what he himself was. The question forming, "Is this fair?" The master answered them, "Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius?" Matthew chapter 20, verse 13. No wrong. The agreement had been clear. The wage had been given. Nothing had been taken from them. Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? Matthew chapter 20, verse 15. The words settled into the space between them, and something about that question did not stay with them alone. It reached him as well. The longer he stood there, the more he began to see something he had not seen before. Every one of them had started the same way, standing in the marketplace, waiting, unchosen. His brother had not begun the day in the vineyard, and neither had the others. None of them had. Each one had been invited in. Each one had been brought into the work by the decision of the master. The difference had only been when. Not why, not worth, not merit, just when. He looked again at those who had come last. There was something in their faces that did not match the tension in the others, gratitude, and something else, almost a quiet hesitation, as if they were still trying to understand why they had been given so much for so little time. Two responses stood side by side, resentment and unworthiness, both looking at the same gift. The line began to disperse, but the question did not. It followed him. It stayed with him. Later, as he moved with the crowd again, he found himself listening to Jesus once more. People had gathered around him, some who had been following for some time, others who stood at a distance, still unsure. He noticed faces he recognized, men who had walked with him longer, others who had only just begun to listen. Some eager, some hesitant, some weary in a way that did not come from a single day's labor. And then Jesus spoke. "Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest." Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. All, not some. Not only those who had been there from the beginning. All. The words settled over the crowd, but they did not stop there. They reached back into the vineyard, back into the line, back into the question. And suddenly, he began to see. The invitation had always been the same, from the first hour to the last. Come. The wage had never been the point. The gift was the master, the vineyard, the belonging, the rest. And it was given, not earned. Whether someone had entered early or late, whether they had carried the weight for years, or had only just begun, the invitation did not change. And neither did the gift. He thought of his brother, grateful in the morning, struggling in the evening, and he began to understand how quickly gratitude can give way to comparison, how easily we begin to measure what was never meant to be measured, and how quietly we forget that we were once the ones standing in the marketplace, hoping to be chosen. As you sit with this teaching today, take a moment to reflect on where comparison may be shaping the way we see our place in the kingdom. Where have we begun to measure our lives besides someone else's, rather than receiving what has been given with gratitude? And where might Jesus be inviting us to lay down both resentment and unworthiness and simply respond to his call to come? If you're willing, share your reflections or questions in the comments so we can learn and walk this journey together.